I have a cousin who decided that he was going to go travel all the way down to the tip of South America backpacking, right? So we dropped him off at the Mexican border and he just started making his way down. He was gone for almost a year and we picked him up about a year later back in Nogales, Arizona. His hair was down to the middle of his back. His clothes were ripped and tattered and most of who he was and what he was held together by duct tape. It was a pretty extraordinary trip. And so I was really excited to catch up with him. So we took him hiking. And just he and I got to go spend some time out in Tanque Verde Falls here in Arizona. We're sitting by one of the falls and just hanging out, and I'm asking him all kinds of questions about his trip. And he gets really quiet for a while, and after a while he looks at me and he goes, "Ryan, you talk to people about God all the time, right?" And I said, yeah, I'm a pastor. I was just laughing, yeah, that's what I do. And he then said to me, "So where is God?" Like that was his legitimate question. And so I responded first, right off the bat, theologically. I said, he's omnipresent. So he is everywhere. Like he's literally everywhere all the time. So that's where he is. And then he just kind of let out this long sigh, like I'd missed him. Like I hadn't seen or heard the actual question somehow. And he was like, I get it. I understand that's like God's supposed to be everywhere because he's God. And he goes, but in terms of like me relating to him, like where is he? And so I shifted. And I gave him the answer that I'd given to people hundreds of times up to that point. And I said, well, it's about a personal relationship with him. So he's like with you, just you have to have a relationship. And he looked and he goes, Ryan, what does that mean? I was like, well, the same way you relate with a friend, the same way you relate with your life, like with other people and things, relate with God, talk to him, engage him. And he goes, I get it, but like, where is he? And I said, what's going on? Like, where is this question coming from? Because I can tell that you're wrestling with something. So he begins to tell me about all these experiences he had moving up through South America, moving up through Mexico, different people he traveled with. He traveled with people of different belief systems, different walks of life, different cultures, through different countries. This pretty extraordinary journey that he went on. And what that ended up doing to him is so many of those moments felt so real and so close. He spent time in the rainforest. He spent time hiking. He spent time in cities. And he said, I have a relationship with people. I have a relationship with nature. I have a relationship even with like the animal kingdom and so many different things because my life is in it and I'm experiencing it. And he goes, but when we talk about God, and I should mention, he grew up in a church. Like his parents helped plant a church. He was hyper involved in youth ministries and Bible studies and all the different things that you could possibly be involved in growing up. He graduated from a Christian school. Like, so he knows all of this stuff already. Like he's been through all of this, but he looks at me and says, where is God? And what he's getting at is that in his life, as he actually looks around this world, he's experiencing so many things. And the one thing that he just doesn't see, the one thing he doesn't experience is God. And I found myself really struggling to answer that question for him on that particular day. I knew all the right answers. I knew the things I ought to say or the things I could say. I knew the Bible passages I could point to. I knew like what good theology looks like. But I really struggled on that particular day sitting at the base of a waterfall talking with my cousin to help him see, to help him understand just where God is. And I wonder if someone were to ask you, where is God, what you would say. There's a really important passage found in the Gospel of John. In fact, it's what he opens his gospel with. And I want to take a moment to read that for us. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
Yeah, there's some things that are really interesting in that passage, things that we want to make sure that we get. And one of them is talking about the idea of darkness and light. And so we don't want to miss this idea. What John is saying is he's referring back to the creation. And he talks about how at the creation there's this darkness, but there's also light that overcomes it. And so that's a really important thing because whatever is creating and making something out of this chaos that is the darkness is that light. And the word that he uses there is a really fun word to kind of walk through.
It's kind of complicated.
It's complicated, but we love complicated. So
we do.
So it's this word logos or logos. Maybe you've heard it either way. And it's translated kind of a bunch of different ways in the Bible, and that's because it really depends on context
Right.
and how it's used. And sometimes it's just translated as, the written word or word, just simply as that.
Right. Every time you read Logos, it's going to say word.
Correct.
The question is, what kind of word is it?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so sometimes it means the written word. Sometimes it's talking about somebody speaking. It means the spoken word. Other times it could be talking about the Bible itself, scriptures. But there's this one time here where it seems to be referring to something far larger, something that is almost cosmic, if you will.
Right. Yeah. The Greeks had this understanding of the word logos, like the basic understanding that we just described, right? These different versions of word, but they had this really cosmic understanding of what you would refer to as the logos. Think of it almost like the way we use the word God. So there's like the Greek gods, lowercase g, right? We'll do all of that. And then we'll say, but there is one God, the God. And all of a sudden it gets capitalized. It gets way bigger. It's not this thing from history. We're talking about something very large. When the Greeks talked about the logos, they saw it as this great big cosmic word. And the reason why is because it was thought that a word is always representative of the thing it's speaking about. So if you think about it, words carry the essence of things. That's why words can actually matter. They carry the essence of things. When you use words, you're describing something.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, you're describing something and you're painting a picture. The word isn't the thing itself. It's the essence of the thing you're pointing to.
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
It's pointing to the very makeup and the
Right.
thing of what it is.
Right, just like when we talk about the Bible, one of the things we'll say is like the Bible isn't God, it's that which points to God, right?
Yes.
It's that's why we call it's the word. So when the Greeks thought of this idea, the word, the idea gets really, really big because they're talking about the essence of the things itself. And John knows this.
Exactly. So why is it so impactful that John actually uses that word and that context?
Right. So each gospel writer begins their gospel strategically and uniquely. John starts writing to an audience that's, yes, Jewish, but also steeped in Greek culture at this particular point in time. And he's trying to reference, we're going to go all the way back to, think of the words he opens with, in the beginning. We're going to get really, really big here. This is the origin of all things. In the beginning was the word. And so what he's highlighting is the logos. It's the essence of all things. And he's articulating Christ. And you see this unfold. There's this darkness, it's formless and empty. And out of this logos, in the beginning was the word, breathes light and life into the darkness, starts to form it so that there's purpose and goodness and all of these pieces that are in it. And what's so significant about this particular passage is that when it's talking about this great big cosmic word, it's actually saying that's what was there at the beginning of all creation, and that's what infused purpose and power and potential into creation itself. This is how big and powerful the Christ is.
And we would miss that if we simply just translated as or viewed it as the written word.
Right.
That would be something that,
But you know who wouldn't have missed it is his actual original audience.
yes.
Those original hearers would have read this and been like, I see what you're doing, John. You're taking something that all these people all around us are looking at going like, there's something really big happening here. And you're saying, that's Jesus. When we started the story of a baby being born, the story doesn't start with a baby. The story actually starts with this great big cosmic Christ who will be born into this world that we're going to call Jesus. And he is so significant. He's actually the essence of creation itself. Like he's interwoven. He's the thing that all of these other things are speaking about, and he's pointing the way.
You can't separate creation from him. You can't speak of creation without speaking of Jesus as well.
No. So that makes it a really huge passage when we think of creation and Jesus being tied to it.
Yeah.
But also, I want to read us Colossians, which I think you have over there, yeah?
I do have it somewhere here. Oh, yes. Colossians. And we are in Colossians 1, verses 15 through 17.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul writes, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. And when he says he's talking about Jesus.
Right.
For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and this is important, and in him all things hold together.
Mm-hmm. So I shared a story about my cousin at the very beginning of this, where he's asking the question, where's God? And if you remember, he's articulating, like, he has a relationship with nature. He has a relationship with people. He has a relationship with all of these things. He struggles with this notion of like, but where is God? And this passage combined with John, do you see it? I hope you see this. They become really, really important for us in understanding and wrestling with some of these things. Because where does it tell us God is?
All over.
Right.
Everywhere.
But when we think of all over, we're like, okay, so he's sort of everywhere. right? What's so unique about what Colossians does is he talks about in him all things hold together. So I want you to look to the person that's sitting next to you right now, which I guess for you and me is you.
Yes, yeah.
Like he's actually holding you together.
Yeah.
He's holding the chair together. He's holding what he's getting at in Colossians, that he's not outside of the snow globe called creation looking in and going like, oh, look what I made. It's really good. And I'm watching it all happen. He's the essence, right? Like John's talking about, who is all of this flows from. And not only is he the essence that all of this flows from, he's the actual energy. He's the presence that's binding it all together all of the time. And so what's so significant about this is it starts to articulate that we live in a world that isn't God just watching it, isn't God just creating it, that he's actually in it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my hope, and I think this is true for you too, our hope is that this moves you from a theological understanding of like God is omnipresent, he is everywhere, to a very personal way of looking at your world, to be able to go, he's not just everywhere, he's in and through and holding all of this together. And so the question I'd ask you, Seth, just for all of us, is like, so when you live your life, when you walk around, how do these two passages impact you?
Well, it makes me realize that, life is not separated into just secular and spiritual, but actually, if it's a God-bathed world, everything I'm encountering is spiritual. Everything I'm encountering, I get a view and I get to engage with the essence of God. And this isn't some weird thing, but it's that I can see the beauty of who God is, and I can see Christ throughout it and understand and appreciate that Christ cares for every ounce and piece of his creation.
For me, it's kind of personal. I wish I would have learned some of this before I'd ever had that conversation with my cousin that day. Because I think the thing I would have gotten to go back and say is that he's far closer to God than he actually realized, and God is far closer to him than he probably ever knew. As we wrap up this lesson for the day, I wanted to take a moment to just share why this is so incredibly important, because I recognize, man, I don't want this to be lost on any of us. So often when you think of the language that we use in our lives, we will pray to invite God into the space, right? We'll say, God, I want to invite you here. Or we'll say, like, God showed up. Or we'll say things like, yeah, he was far off, but then he came near. And I want you to think, in our language, we often hear and we feel like God is somewhere out there and we're here and we're trying to move this thing closer. And I think the reality is, when you think about what we talked about today, he's actually all around us. We need to change the way we talk, the way we think, the way we perceive. This whole world is this dynamic interaction with God all of the time. I think of it like water. When you jump into water, you can feel it all around you. Like you can see through it like it's empty space, but you're never at a loss for the fact that like there is water everywhere and you're in it, and it's pushing in, it's in you, all of these things. That's God. And I think it's so important that we come to see our lives that way, that we come to live our lives that way. Like this whole great big experience that we call life is actually us in that, living that way, bringing that to our workplaces, our families, our relationships, in the moments of tension that you find yourself in relationships with people. We live in a God-bathed world. In the moments of difficulty, we live in a God-bathed world. In the moments of joy, it's always him pressing in all around us, holding it all together. It's all one giant interaction. And the question isn't so like, and now what will you concretely do? The question is, will you open your eyes and your heart and your spirit to actually experience your life that way? Because what I believe, because I've seen this in my own life, I've come to know this for myself, is that you'll see that he's been there all along. He's not nearly as far off as you might think he is. He doesn't have to be invited in. He's as close as he could possibly be.